People, it has been a long time since I've posted a video. Part of the reason for the delay is that I underwent a series of ailments. First, I got my first ever case of pink eye. The viral, not the bacterial kind. So no, my pink eye was not the result of me rubbing my eyes with the copper lights featured in other videos I've produced in the past. Having pink eye was awful. Awful. The only thing good about it is that for a while I looked a little like the vampire villain Deacon Frost in the first Blade movie. I like Blade. I like vampires. There have been times that I have wished I were a vampire. About a month after recovering from pink eye, I managed to get MRSA from picking blackberries on the side of the road, I think. Here you can see the MRSA in its initial stages, in a photo from an angle that makes my calf look about 40 times larger than it actually is. A few days after I recovered from MRSA, I was on antibiotics for 10 days, I got COVID for the first time. In my case, having COVID ended up being no big deal. The fever and lethargy lasted but a couple of days. But then I was treated to a week-long deep depression, during which I had 1 or 2 suicidal ideations. Don't tell my therapist that. Actually, I don't have a therapist anymore because I fixed myself. All right, let's move on to what this video is really about, namely the fact that I am leaving Obsidian for HEPTABASE. Okay, so I haven't actually decided that I'm leaving Obsidian. I have several Obsidian vaults and will likely continue to use a number of them for quite some time. However, using HEPTABASE the past few weeks has forced me to confront 2 major problems I have had when using Obsidian. The first problem is something that for a long time I considered a benefit of using Obsidian. I'm referring here to the never-ending customization that Obsidian enables, especially by way of its 1,200 plus community plugins. There are so many amazing community plugins for Obsidian. But for me, and many others, using those plugins to customize Obsidian has resulted in an enormous waste of time. I think it's safe to say that the amount of time I've spent customizing Obsidian is at least 5 and probably closer to 10 or 50 times more than the amount of time I've used Obsidian to actually do the research and scholarship that brought me to the app in the first place. One thing I like about HEPTABASE is that it gives me pretty much everything I need without my having to customize it. Another way of saying this is that out of the box, it more or less does what I want. Alan Chan, one of the HEPTABASE co-founders, uses that phrase out of the box in explaining which kinds of people might benefit from using HEPTABASE. He writes, if you are heavily focused on learning and research and are looking for a tool that can help you acquire a deep understanding of your learning topic, HEPTABASE's intuitive interface and out-of-the-box visual learning workflow might be the best fit for you. You won't need to spend time figuring out how to set up a learning and research system. Instead, you can dive right into concentrated learning on the first day. Getting into the visual learning workflow that Alan speaks of here and that HEPTABASE makes possible is what helped me to more fully recognize a second problem I have had with Obsidian, namely the fact that I often get lost inside of it. I'm not yet at a point where I can properly explain why I often get lost when I'm working in Obsidian, but I think part of it has something to do with the fact that it doesn't have the sidebar on the right that HEPTABASE has, and that Roam and LogSeq also have. That right sidebar is something I have always missed after making the switch from Roam to Obsidian. In the absence of such a sidebar, I find myself over and over again having to resize Obsidian windows and panes. Each time I narrow or widen a pane, I lose my place, which makes for a workflow that doesn't flow all that well. After trying out HEPTABASE for a day or two, I went back into Obsidian and managed to create something like a sidebar, at which point I thought, great, now I don't need to switch from Obsidian to HEPTABASE. I was relieved because I don't like the idea of moving my notes from one app to another. The last time I switched from taking and storing notes in one app to another was about 3 years ago, when I switched to Obsidian after having used Roam for about a year. And I used an app called the Archive for about a year prior to that. A few months ago, I came up with a rule I've been trying to follow ever since. That rule is to not seriously entertain using a different app if I'm 80% satisfied with the one I'm currently using. I thought I was more than 80% satisfied with Obsidian. I was more than 80% satisfied with Obsidian. And yet, even after making tweaks to Obsidian to make it a little bit more like HEPTABASE, I soon returned to HEPTABASE itself. I remain proud, just a little bit, of the janky sidebar I created in Obsidian, but I realized that having a right sidebar isn't the only thing that made working with HEPTABASE so much easier and more pleasant than working with Obsidian. And yet, as I said earlier, I'm still not entirely sure why I find working with HEPTABASE so much better than working with Obsidian. After experimenting with it for a few more weeks, perhaps I'll be in a position to explain things more fully. That explanation, I should say now, would likely include discussion of the visual/spatial thinking that HEPTABASE makes possible, its Notion-like tables, the fact that its mobile app makes it easy to add notes to a journal or day of the week page, and the different ways HEPTABASE lets you incorporate highlights into whatever project you're working on. I'm hoping to make some videos about HEPTABASE's main features as well as what I am using HEPTABASE to do. I've already recorded the first video, which is about working with PDF highlights in HEPTABASE. In this regard, HEPTABASE is better even than LogSeq, which many people understandably point to when it comes to apps that enable you to drag a highlighted passage from a PDF, drop it onto whatever page you're using to collect and add notes to those highlights, and then, if you want, you can click on the highlight to be taken back to the page of the PDF it came from. The last thing I should say is that a couple weeks ago I was accepted into HEPTABASE's affiliate program. That doesn't mean that I work for HEPTABASE, but it does mean that if any of you use the link beneath this video to check out HEPTABASE and then eventually decide to pay for a HEPTABASE subscription, I'll get a 20% cut of what you pay. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether the $40 to $60 I suspect I'll make each year as a HEPTABASE affiliate is a large enough sum to incentivize me to make HEPTABASE videos purely for financial gain. Just keep in mind that each of the videos I end up making will likely take me as long as most of my past videos have taken me to make, which is usually 10 to 20 hours from start to finish. I'm very slow. All right, be on the lookout for the next video. Hit the frickin' like button already, maybe the subscribe button too. Till next time.